Welcome to the Passive Income Machine podcast, where we show you how to break free from the grind and achieve real financial freedom in 10 years or less. My name is Ryan D. Lee, and I've helped thousands turn income into cash flow, trade fake money for real assets, and take back control over their time, their wealth, and ultimately their life. Each week, you'll get strategy, tools, and mindset to build your own passive income machine. So my friends, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode. All right, my friends. Welcome back to the Passive Income Machine podcast. You are on the microphone today with me, Ryan D. Lee, and my man, Scott Saunders, the tax slasher extraordinaire. He's pulling out his samurai sword, and we're going to be talking about part B of the podcast, where Scott is going to be helping us understand how the tax game works. Scott, you ready to slash the taxes today?
Let's slash away. I'll bring the sword out. Let's have some fun getting after it.
Let's go. I wouldn't mind actually seeing your samurai sword. I bet you have a great samurai. You know what, Scott? I'm going to go on a tangent here. I love samurai swords. I'm just going to say it. I love it. And I had some samurai swords. Okay, so you know my wife. My wife, Bethany, she's amazing. She's amazing, and she's the best home decorator. You've been to my house. She's a wonderful home decorator. And I had one of those cheesy, 3 samurai swords, the big one, the middle one, and the top one. I had that in my office back in our other house. And, I loved it. It was my samurai sword, right?
Yeah.
And we moved to this house, and I'm unpacking, and I'm getting everything set up in my office, and I'm like, dude, where did my samurai swords go? And Bethany said those samurai swords couldn't make the move. It wasn't a classy thing, and so I lost my samurai swords. She took my samurai swords, Scott. How am I supposed to handle that? I don't know. Sorry about the default there, my friends.
You can always buy them back. You can get the real deal. You can, I'm sure out there you can get a real samurai sword. So
man, she pulls a cheap behind the scenes punch. She accidentally, intentionally lost my samurai swords in the move. But we didn't come here today to talk about samurai swords. We came here today to talk about how to use samurai swords in the form of the tax code to really arm you with some strategies to lower your taxes. So if you didn't listen to the last episode, I'm going to invite you to consider go back and listen to that episode, because we open up a framework to help you see and understand what we're going to be talking about today. Scott, the focus of today is to help people listening to this podcast understand the comprehensive income tax code, from what I'm paying today to what I might have to pay to the future, and how do I look to the future and to today and balance out my tax strategy. So Scott, let me turn it over to you. Kind of give us some wisdom here.
Well, when you look at taxes, you got a couple options. You got taxes you pay today. You got taxes you pay in the future. You can defer taxes. You can reduce taxes. And so it's a balancing game of looking at one way or the other. What do you want to do with your taxes? And so to me, it takes a blended. You want an integrated approach. You want to be thinking towards that. What a lot of people do is they blindly kick the can down the road and just defer the taxes. And that's what we were talking about in the last episode, right? They invest in a 401k and they say, I'm putting stuff in there and later on I'll just deal with it. They all kind of know you're going to have to pay it. Brian, I went through this myself with my mom. She had the RMDs, right? The required minimum distribution. And I had to help her when she was doing all this. And these were some pretty big numbers. She was a school teacher, and yet every year she had to pay these taxes. She didn't have any concept that she'd be paying these taxes. She just assumed, I put in a plan, it'll all work out. But when the time comes where you actually have to start taking those distributions, you're drawing it down, and every year you're giving the IRS a pretty good sized check, especially if you've been a diligent saver and let it kind of compound over time. So I've been on both sides. I'm not at that age now where I'm doing the RMDs, but watching my mom go through it and seeing the size of the numbers, it really made it concrete to me that this is something that you will face down the road inevitably. And as the case would be, she passed away, and guess what? Her kids, me and my 2 brothers, we inherited that, and we have to pay her taxes for her even though she passed. So it's kind of interesting. Those are things that I don't think people think about because they seem like they're way in the future. But I think the more we can kind of learn about that today and look at our present situation and realize we do have a tax situation that we are going to have to deal with in the future based upon our strategy, it gives another lens of looking at things.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is, people think about income tax as work, right? I'm going to go to work, and whether I have a business, whether I'm W-2, whether I've, side hustler, solopreneur, whatever it is, my income is a function of my labor. And I think people are used to this idea of paying taxes on their labor, right? And that was what we discussed in the last one, of why that we should never get used to that. But without going back into that, people are used to paying taxes on their labor. And I don't think people associate taxes on their retirement income, because they think of it this idea: I'm not working anymore, therefore I'm not laboring anymore, therefore my taxes should go away. Right? They shouldn't be what they are today because I'm not actively contributing to the economy, to making money anymore. But I think that's the biggest misconception, is your income taxes are a function of the income that comes into you from wherever that comes, whether it's your active efforts or, in the concept of retirement, your distributions from taxable or tax-deferred accounts. And that's the challenge, right? When you go into retirement, when you look at your total sum of money, how much of that sum of money is actually yours? And how much of that sum of money is going to go to the form of taxes as you're taking income out of those assets? So Scott, as we talk to clients and empire builders in our community about their financial freedom goals, I think one of the things that we do well, and I'm going to pat us on the back here, is we actually begin with the end in mind. What is the purpose of all long-term savings? It is a future stream of income. That's really all it is. Savings is just spending in the future. That's it. And so if we know that, we try to play the tax game, right? We try to understand, when should I pay taxes? Should I pay them today? And if I am going to pay them today, how can I use the tax code to lower as much of my income taxes today? And if I am going to pay them today, how can I ensure that I don't pay them tomorrow? Right? So talk us through this it's kind of a juggle. It's kind of a teeter-totter. When should I pay my taxes? When I do pay my taxes, how do I lower them? And should I shift my tax liability to today or to tomorrow?
Yeah, it is. It's a juggling act, and it's unique for everybody. Everybody's got a little bit different situation. But I think that from a starting standpoint, you want to look at it and go, wait, what could I do with my income today? Are there some things that I can take advantage of right here and now? Because think about it. $1 today is worth more than $1 in the future, whenever that is. So from a starting standpoint, is there anything I can do today that'll help me reduce the income tax so I can keep more dollars? That to me is square one when you're looking at it. Square two then is going, if I am deferring taxes into the future, am I creating something that can help mitigate that? Is there anything that's going to be kind of a counterbalance? Because the last thing you want to do is kick the can down the road without preparing for it. And I think that's kind of where you want an integrated plan where you're preparing for it. You might choose to kick a tax liability into the future, but you might want to try and have a tax loss that would kind of tie together with that or associate with that. There's nothing worse. We've seen our community all the time where people get a windfall, right? They have a stock, they're in a company and they go public and they get a stock thing, but they've got this huge tax liability with no way to offset it. If you can try to kind of balance that and say, if I'm going to take a tax liability in the future, I want to try and plan ahead and have something that can maybe offset that liability. I think it's a starting point, and few people really step back and think about it that way. Most people tend to look at it kind of in the here and now. This is what I'm doing this year, and I'll worry about next year when I get there. And that's something I think we do pretty well, is getting people to kind of expand their thinking and look at it kind of as an integrated plan rather than this year I do this and next year I do the same thing and I pay X percent. We step back and we say, let's get a plan in place where we think through how to do this.
So let's actually put some numbers to this. As you were talking there, I was pulling up a calculator. I'm going to share my screen. For those of you that aren't on YouTube, always feel free to join us on YouTube. We'll narrate what we're going to be looking at with you guys. But for those of you that want to see what I'm about to share with you, let me share this screen here. Scott, can you see my screen here?
I can.
Okay, so here's what we're going to be looking at. Let's look at the current tax rates the way they work today. This is on income tax. So let's say I'm making $200,000 a year. At $200,000 a year, the first 10% that I make, the first $23,000 that I make is going to be taxed at 10%. The next $73,000 that I make is taxed at 12%, and then after that I jump from 12% all the way up to 22%. The next $103,000 that I make is taxed at 22%. And if I want to just keep climbing this tax ladder here, let's take it all the way up to $500,000 of income. We go from 10% tax rate, 12% tax rate, 22, 24, all the way up to 32, and we just keep climbing this tax ladder. So the question that we're asking you right now is, as you're thinking about both today and in the future, when do you want to pay your taxes? Now, if you believe tax rates are going to be higher in the future, you might choose to do everything you can today to lower your taxes on your active income today. If you choose that tax rates are going to be higher in the future, and maybe I just said that, if you think taxes are going to stay the same, you might try to lower your taxes today and just think you're going to be in the same tax bracket tomorrow. If you think tax rates are going to be higher in the future, you might try to lower your taxes today and eliminate taxes tomorrow. And if you think that tax rates are going to be lower in the future, then you should shift as much of your money to the future, your income tax to the future, as possible. So it all comes down to what you think. And man, your guess, Scott, is as good as mine. I think the math indicates tax rates have to at least stay the same, if not go up. But at the very least, when we're helping someone plan for the future, I would say probably 60 to 70% of the people that come into our world, they already have money in conventional tax-deferred accounts. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because they've kind of followed the traditional path. They went to a job, employer says, hey, welcome here. Now we'll get you on the 401k, and they sign up and they start contributing X percentage. So I would say, yeah, easily well over half our community has kind of built up an account or two where they've got an IRA, a 401k, 403 if they're, in that system. Very, very common.
So let's assume here, with this chart that we're looking at, let's say I want $200,000 of future income, okay? And if I want $200,000 of future income, let's say I'm gonna now put myself in a 22% federal tax bracket. That's gonna be the highest marginal tax bracket I'll be in. And let's say I live in a state where there's a 5% tax rate. On that $200,000 of income, that ultimately means I'm gonna be paying about $41,000 in taxes. I'll take $200,000 out gross, I'll pay my taxes, and I'll be net leftover spendable income, $160,000. Right, there might be a few things I can do to lower that, but again, in the future, many of the standard tax deductions are oftentimes gone. So if this is true, if someone comes to the table with us and says, hey, all of my tax liabilities in the future, how do I balance out my teeter-totter? Let's take a moment, and I'm going to close this down, and then let's come back to these numbers. How would someone balance their tax teeter-totter in the future to where they want $200,000 of income, but how much of that has to come out of tax deferred versus maybe tax advantage or tax free? How would someone balance that? Hey, real quick, before we get back into it, I gotta tell you, if you're getting value here, you'll love the How to Retire in 10 Years Summit. I mean, seriously, everything you're hearing right now, the tactics, strategies, all the insights, they all tie back to this one incredible event. We're laying out the exact blueprint for financial freedom in 2025, and pre-registration is open right now. If you jump in early, you'll get special bonuses that won't last forever. So hit that link in the description or go to retireintenyears.com and secure your spot. Now, let's get back to the show.
Well, the option's yours. You can use some things in the tax code to plan ahead for that, and you can start creating some buckets of income through different strategies that'll build up where you actually now can have sources of tax-free income. And you're teaching on that, we may or may not get into it in this one, maybe for a later episode, of that whole concept of the equity mill is so powerful. I just shared that with somebody yesterday, and they were blown away that you could actually have tax-free income from a couple of different sources, and that they can actually work together to kind of replenish the capital that's available. So those are some strategies. Do you want to get into what those are?
Let's get into some of them. If I were to sit down and do something crazy, okay, if I were to say, hey, I'm bored out of my mind, not only that, I want to save as much money as possible, and I were to crack open the tax code and just see what the tax code has to say, what options would the IRS give me to choose from to eliminate my taxes in the future on my future income?
One option, you can invest in something that we call a vault, right? It's a high cash value life insurance policy that builds up cash value in there quickly, and you now have a reservoir of cash that you can draw against. You want to expand upon that one, Ryan, a little bit? Because that is a powerful strategy that, frankly, wealthy people have been using this for literally hundreds of years, and yet it's something that's so common and looks so ordinary that it doesn't look, kind of as sexy as some of the different financial products that are out there with all these fancy names. But whole life insurance is a critical component in what the wealthy do, and you and I know examples of wealthy people, whether it's Walt Disney building Disney World drawn upon that, or people that have run for president have used these to fund their campaigns. But a lot of people that are very, very successful and have access to the best financial advisors, they use these very unique policies strategically to have a reservoir of cash. So maybe you want to unpack that a little bit, but that's probably step number one, is to take advantage of that strategy.
Okay, love that. So we've got overfunded whole life insurance, and there's a lot that comes with that. I'll just kind of throw my perception in the arena with that. I remember the first time I learned that life insurance could be a financial tool, not just a life insurance policy. I didn't believe it, right? I was born with the thought process that life insurance is almost a necessary evil. It's an expense that you want to get just enough of, and the only benefit you get from it is if you die. And again, I think this is misunderstanding, misperception, and in many cases, it's the fundamental lack of financial education that people receive today. But overfunded whole life insurance is where I try to put as much money as I can into an insurance policy and get the least amount of death benefit back. And the way I think about it, the death benefit is what qualifies it to be life insurance. And once it's life insurance, it qualifies as tax-free. And then all of that extra overfunding, that extra money I put into it, it's growing. It's backed by guaranteed returns, profits from companies, and it's growing tax-free. And what you're saying, Scott, is I can take the money back out just like I can with another tax-free tool, a Roth IRA, completely tax-free, which could give me a source of income in the future. So now if we fast forward to the future and 50% of my income is coming from a tax-deferred account, an IRA, and 50% of my income is coming from a life insurance policy or a Roth IRA or some form of a tax-free account, now I actually end up with more spendable income. And we'll go through the numbers on that in just a minute, but we've got life insurance. What are some other tools that can be used to generate income, either today or in the future, that will give us tax benefits to lower our tax rate?
I'd say another one, real estate. Great tool to do that, because real estate over time has all these dynamics that really allow something to build up in value. You're really buying a property. So when we say real estate, we're not talking about a primary residence that you live in. We're talking about an investment property, a rental property. So you've got your tenant who's essentially paying your carrying costs, your mortgage, your taxes, your insurance. And over time, let's say 20, 30 years, what happens is that goes up in value a lot. It builds up what's called equity. You've got this beautiful thing called the mortgage paying down. The principal balance pays down over time. You've got some tax advantages. You've got the ability to add leverage. But I've got the ability to buy an asset that happens to be real estate that has all these unique dynamics. And that's another place to put money in what a lot of us do in real estate. You hear the term of doing a cash out refi. You've got an asset that goes up. You can refinance that and pull the money out through a refinance. Doesn't trigger taxes at all. It's tax-free money. And Brian, that's what the wealthy do. When Elon Musk wants to get money, he just pledges some of his stock in one of his things, and a bank gives him a loan against that collateral. He's actually just refinancing. So with real estate, we've got an asset. We go to the bank. It's got a value to it. The bank says, great, we'll give you up to 75% of that value. We'll give that to you in a loan, and that loan it's not income because it's a loan against the asset. So that's another vehicle that you can stack up. And you do that with one piece of real estate, it's great. You buy multiple pieces of real estate, you build what's called a portfolio. Now you've got a really powerful tool to draw against, because you've got all that accumulated equity that builds up over time. Not going to happen overnight, doesn't happen in 1 year, 2 years, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There's something magic that happens with that. And that gives us another really powerful tool to get tax-free money. Your thoughts?
Scott, I think you just kind of opened up another little rabbit hole that we need to unpack just a little bit for the podcast listeners, because where the tax code can get a little bit confusing is the type of income that I'm taking. And the type of income that I'm taking is going to determine the tax rate that I fall within. And, the easiest, the one that most people understand, because this is where most people's money comes from, is ordinary income. That's the one that progressively climbs the higher and higher tax bracket. That's where your 401k lives, right? Your IRA lives as ordinary income. And so in the future, the more money I take out of that 401k, it's just like I'm working today. The more money I make, the more money I pay in taxes. But there's other forms of income, and if we can qualify the income as a different form of income, then we can actually move ourselves into a lower tax bracket. There's portfolio income, and portfolio income is really I think it's 15 to 20%. Isn't that the tax range on portfolio income generally?
Yep, that's about right. Yep.
What would be your definition of portfolio income, Scott?
Portfolio income is income that you're getting off of an investment portfolio of assets that are generated. So if you look at the first one, it's income. It's a labor, basically your labor translated into income. The other one now is you've got an asset base or investments, you're getting it off of that. That's portfolio income.
And generally, that kind of falls in two categories of itself, right? Is it capital gain short term or capital gain long term, right? And so there's these nuances that determine how much you're taxed in. Now, what you just mentioned is you mentioned the type of income that people like Elon Musk take. And I think this is the one that confuses people the most, right? And this is what real estate and life insurance opens up that isn't really available in a Roth IRA. Roth IRA is still taxed as ordinary income, right? You're just paying the taxes today and you're getting it out tax-free tomorrow. But it's still ordinary income that's coming out of that thing. But life insurance and real estate is something, and I don't know if Robert Kiyosaki coined this. I use this all the time because I love it, but it's phantom income, right? And phantom income is using debt as money. So Scott, unpack that for just a minute, because I remember when I read that on Rich Dad Poor Dad, debt is money. Like, I mean, my head was spinning when he said savers are losers. My head was spinning when he said, the rich don't work for money. My head about fell off my shoulders when he said that there's such a thing called phantom income. What the heck is this thing?
It's phenomenal when you finally realize what it is. So debt actually becomes income. So you can borrow against an asset of any type, but let's say real estate or stocks that you pledge or anything. You borrow against it. And it's money you can use, but you don't have to pay taxes on it. That's the beauty of it, right? I can access this capital, but it's not going to be considered ordinary income that's taxable. Yet if I take a loan out, a refinance of $100,000, I get $100,000 that I can use and spend freely. I can use it for groceries, utilities, travel, whatever I want. So I get access to all that income by doing a refinance of an asset.
So compare this for me, because this is where I think some people's heads start. How does that work, right? So if I'm going to go take debt, most people are going to associate that debt with what it is. It's a future stream of payments, right? So if I'm going to go take, $100,000 and put it on Visa, essentially what I'm doing is I'm mortgaging my future, right? I'm spending $100,000 today. I don't pay taxes on it because Visa gave me a loan, but now I'm going to have to trade my future to pay that thing off. How is it different taking debts as income from an asset like real estate? What's the difference here? How do I not trap myself?
Well, the way you're not trapped with it is when you're doing the first one on a credit card, you're basically foregoing your time in the future, right? I take the money today, but I'm going to have to take my time to pay it back in the future. When we look at debt on an asset, it's completely different. The asset already has equity that's accumulated. It's built up over time. So all I'm doing is I'm drawing down a portion of that equity, and then I'm extracting it with a loan. And in the case of debt on real estate, here's where this is powerful. I'm not actually paying the loan back because now I've got my tenants that are in the real estate. They're paying the loan back for me. So I'm not taking my labor to pay back my loan. The asset now has tenants in it, and those tenants now are paying back my loan. So I'm not taking my time and labor to pay back that, but the asset there that secures the loan has tenants. They're doing it for me. And it all comes down to this really powerful concept, and I think you shared this in a note. It's really learning to kind of transition about how important it is to be in that ownership economy. If I own the asset, it gives me opportunities. If I don't own the asset, then I'm not able to unlock those opportunities. And to me, that's a big deal. That's really what separates those that are getting ahead versus those that aren't, or those that actually own and control the asset, because they're able to unlock these opportunities that if you don't have the asset, you just simply don't have access to it. You're limited now to being into trading your time for the dollars, where when you have the asset, now you've got a whole nother playbook that opens up to you that you can take advantage of. Speaking of Kiyosaki, he does that in his cash flow game. He's got a game where you stay in the rat race and you work hard to get out of it. When you get out of that rat race, you now go to this whole other game, and the rules are completely different. So the rules that allowed you here to get ahead don't apply in that wider game. And I suggest it for anybody, if you don't have that game, that cash flow game by Kiyosaki, it is really a fun game. We played it at Christmas. We were there for 3-4 hours, laughing and playing. And honestly, Brian, my kids kicked my butt. I lost in that game, and they had a great time killing me. So they got to learn some cool concepts. And I got smothered by my kids and ended up having to eat a little humble pie. But that's kind of the concept now. Is now you're playing on that outer track where the rules are completely different. And I think the trick is, a lot of us, when we're operating, we're in that inner track where we're trying to just make it from day to day, and we don't understand that we've got all of these other ways to operate and different levers that we can pull.
You know what, Scott? I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. The tax game is the game that governs our life. That's really what it comes down to. I'm going to open back up this chart now, because now that we understand some of the ways that we can lower our taxes on our future income, through debt, through leverage, through capital gains, or ordinary income, because likely your income is going to come out in some combination of these forms of income. And so what we help people do is, if you already have money in a tax-deferred account, what would your life look like? If all of your money was taxed as ordinary income in the future, this $200,000, you'd be paying about $41,000 in taxes. So the IRS would come in before you get to spend on anything and take their chunk right off the top. But here's the cool part. If 50% of your income, right, we're still taking $200,000, but if we've balanced out our tax teeter-totter and 50% of our assets now are in life insurance, are in real estate, let's say that we can take $100,000 out of those accounts. And here's the crazy part about life insurance and about equity out of a portfolio. You don't even file a return on it. It's private income. It's not even reportable income at all. So now I've got $100,000 to spend tax-free, and now I'm going to take $100,000 out of my tax-deferred account. And if I switch it now to only $100 instead of $200, my tax rate just dropped from $41,000 to $15,000. To $15,000. So now I end up with, what would that be? I end up with $25,000 more of spendable income in the future, simply because I've balanced my tax teeter-totter. Scott, what are your thoughts on that concept, that idea, and why is it so important for people to start thinking about this right now?
You got to think about it now, because to get there, you've got to make decisions today to kind of pre-position yourself to do that. What you shared is powerful. Saving $25,000 in taxes, that's a lot of extra money. But to get there, you've got to make spending and investment decisions today. So you have to reallocate money from places where people typically do it into some of these vehicles we're talking about, right? An overfunded life insurance policy, real estate. But you got to start doing that today to 20, 30, 40 years from now to have that structure set up. And what I would say you can do, the positive is, you just outlaid it as 50-50. Why not make it even more in the tax-free account, bump it up to 60%, 70%? So, it's our choice. If we pre-position today, we can actually increase that percentage and make it even a higher percentage that's tax-free. It's our choice. But the decisions we make today determine the outcome that we're going to have 30 years down the road. And boy, that's one that, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around how important our decisions are now. And then by making, you think of that old one of the airplane, right? It goes from LA to New York, and it's just 1 degree off, and it doesn't end up in New York. It ends up, hundreds of miles north. It's kind of the same thing with our finances. Making a little course correction today makes a big difference way down the road. And that's what we're all about, is helping people make a lot of little course corrections and stacking them on top. And people, instead of going here, end up at this outcome over here, which is called financial freedom in 10 years or less. And that's what I get excited about.
That's it right there, Scott. All right, my friends, so if you're not convinced, I don't know what it's going to take. I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe you love paying taxes. Maybe you think it's a form of patriotic duty. But I'm here to tell you that it's not. The country was founded on patriots who stood up for their time, who stood up for their work, who stood up for their values. And listen, my friends, you not understanding the tax code, that's up to you. Just like Scott said, you have a choice. You can remain financially ignorant, and that financial ignorance does have a real cost. And when we translate that ignorance to life, you will end up, I mean, we could just as easily translate $25,000. How many days, how many months, how many quarters of the year does it take for you to end up with 25,000 spendable dollars in your account? That's what you're trading, my friends. You're trading your time for that money. So here's the reality. We invite you, we plead with you, we implore you to raise your financial intelligence. And don't just think about it, don't just learn about it, do something about it. In fact, we just got off the phone with our tax strategist who's coming in to do a big presentation inside of our community next week. It's our quarterly tax cadence. And on a quarterly basis, we talk about what to do right now to close the year out so we can ensure that we get to the end of the year and we've maximized our tax deductions, we've maximized our tax savings. We're keeping every dollar, which is a measurement of our time and our life, in our bank account that's possible. So Scott, with that in mind, I appreciate you bringing your knowledge, your wisdom to the table today to talk to us about the game of taxes. You started off in the last podcast saying it was fun. I did have fun, although every time I talk about taxes, I have to balance fun with aggravation. I get aggravated. So Scott, thank you, my friend, for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, my friends, thanks so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate you tuning in. But before you go, if we talked about something today that made you want to take action, you need to get yourself registered for the How to Retire in 10 Years Summit. It's the financial game changer that you've been looking for, teaching you exactly how to create passive income and financial freedom in 2025. Jump on it early because we've got a special bonus waiting for you. All the details are in the link below, or head on over to retireintenyears.com. So get registered and I'll see you at the summit.